everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today into habits of really successful women and, not just the typical like girl boss stuff, but really about building a life that you love on your terms.
That's right.
And our guide for this deep dive is Dr. Faye Bate. She is a doctor and a self-development enthusiast, and she has a YouTube video called 7 Habits of Top 1% Women. And okay, I'll admit, when I first saw the title, I was a little bit like, this is going to be clickbaity.
Yeah.
But I actually watched it, and she offers some really interesting insights, and it's all backed by science.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's refreshing to see a discussion about success that goes beyond just climbing the corporate ladder. Dr. Bate really seems to be focusing on helping women build a life of confidence, resilience, and purpose, which those are all valuable, regardless of what your career path is.
Absolutely. So are you ready to kind of unpack these habits with me?
Let's dive in.
Okay, so habit number 1 that Dr. Bate talks about is financial empowerment. And she says, and I'm quoting this directly from the video, the wealthiest, most successful women don't just save money, they make their money work for them. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, right?
Yeah, it is bold. And I think, she's challenging this old school notion that women should shy away from finances. She's advocating for a shift in mindset, going from scarcity to abundance.
Right.
Where women understand that they have the power to create wealth and security for themselves.
And she doesn't just stop at mindset, though. She actually gives a really interesting technique for building self-trust when it comes to your money. It's called the money date. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
It's basically setting aside dedicated time each week to just sit down with your finances, track your spending, even explore investment options.
Yeah, and that's what I like about it, is that she provides a really concrete action step. It takes the intimidation factor out of finance and makes it feel a lot more approachable.
Right, because instead of avoiding those bank statements, you're actually actively engaging with your money and making conscious choices about it. So what stood out to you about this whole financial empowerment habit?
Honestly, it was the statistic about women in investing. Did you know that 71% of women now own investments in the stock market?
Wow.
Which is an 18% increase from the previous year.
That's huge.
It's a big jump. But, despite this surge in women investors, there's still a pretty significant gender gap when it comes to investing.
Really?
Yeah. Studies show that women are often less likely to invest in the first place. And perhaps that's due to a lack of confidence or financial literacy.
That's a great point, and I think Dr. Bate would argue that overcoming that hesitation is a crucial part of achieving true financial empowerment. It's not just about having the money, it's about having the knowledge and confidence to manage it effectively.
Exactly. And, financial empowerment is about having the resources to pursue your dreams, whether that's, starting a business, traveling the world, or simply just having peace of mind.
Right. Okay, so moving on to habit number 2, trust capital. Now, this one really resonated with me because I've definitely been known to break a promise or two to myself, especially when it comes to those big, ambitious goals.
Yeah, we've all been there.
So how do we actually build that self-trust?
Well, Dr. Bate argues that self-trust is the cornerstone of success. And she makes this interesting point that it's not about relying on willpower alone. It's about rewiring your brain to associate action with reward.
And how do we do that? Because she mentioned something about micro promises.
Right. Instead of aiming for these huge and potentially overwhelming goals, she recommends focusing on keeping micro promises, committing to reading just 10 pages of a book each day, or maybe spending 15 minutes decluttering your desk. The idea is that each time you keep that promise, no matter how small, your brain releases dopamine, which then creates a positive feedback loop and strengthens your self-trust.
Oh, it's just like building those mental muscles one small win at a time. I like that. But isn't there a risk of getting too caught up in those small wins and losing sight of the bigger picture?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
I think that's where it becomes crucial to tie those micro promises back to your larger goals. So for example, if your goal is to write a novel, committing to writing for 30 minutes each day, that's a micro promise that directly supports that larger aspiration. So it's about finding those small, manageable actions that move you closer to your ultimate goal.
I see. So it's not just about checking things off a to-do list. It's about choosing micro promises that are actually meaningful and aligned with your values and aspirations.
Precisely. It's about creating a system that supports your growth and builds that self-trust along the way.
All right, let's move on to Dr. Bates' third habit, the refuse reset. Now, this one might be a bit challenging for those of us who are, shall we say, people pleasers.
You're telling me.
I'm raising my hand over here.
Learning to say no and setting boundaries can be incredibly difficult, especially for women who are often conditioned to put others' needs before their own.
Right.
But Dr. Bate makes this really compelling case for why this is so important.
She does. And I was particularly struck by the research she cited about the negative health impacts of chronic emotional suppression. She even argues that it can increase the risk of autoimmune diseases, anxiety, and depression in women. That's
Absolutely.
pretty serious stuff.
It is. And what happens is this constant pressure to say yes and put on that happy face leads to chronic stress, which then weakens the immune system and makes us more vulnerable to both physical and mental health issues.
So it's not just about feeling overwhelmed or resentful, it's about protecting our well-being on a fundamental level. So I'm curious, like, what are some practical tips for actually setting those boundaries without feeling like we're being rude or letting people down?
Well, Dr. Bates suggests starting small. Even just acknowledging how uncomfortable it feels to even think about saying no, and then gradually incorporating simple phrases into your vocabulary, like, I'd love to, but I can't right now, or that doesn't work for me. And the key is you don't owe anyone an explanation.
That's so liberating, isn't it? Just being able to say no without feeling obligated to justify yourself. Exactly.
It's about respecting your own needs and making sure those needs are met, because ultimately you can't pour from an empty cup.
Oh, I love that. Okay, are you ready to dive into habit number 4?
I'm intrigued. Bring it on.
This one is all about the power of the mind. Dr. Bate calls it the mirror rule, and it's about using the power of visualization to create the reality you want. Now, I know visualization can sometimes get a bad rap, like it's just wishful thinking,
Right.
but Dr. Bate takes a much more grounded approach. She explains the neurological basis for how it actually works.
What's fascinating is that when you visualize something vividly, your brain actually doesn't know the difference between that imagined scenario and reality.
Oh, really? So my brain thinks it's actually happening.
In a sense, yes.
Mm-mm.
It fires neurons in the same way it would if you were actually experiencing that reality. It's like creating a mental rehearsal for success. And this is where Dr. Bates' specific techniques come in the perfect day exercise and the neuroscience-backed vision board.
Okay, tell me more about these techniques. I'm all ears.
So the perfect day exercise involves writing out in detail what your ideal day would look like a year from now, engaging all your senses, what you see, smell, hear, feel even the thoughts running through your mind. The vision board, on the other hand, uses images and symbols to represent your goals and aspirations, and that further embeds the vision in your subconscious mind.
I love how she brings these techniques to life with such concrete examples. So it's not just about vaguely picturing yourself succeeding, it's about creating a rich multisensory experience that actually feels real to your brain.
Exactly. And by repeatedly focusing on this vision, you're literally rewiring your brain to support your goals. It's a powerful way to tap into the incredible plasticity of the brain.
Wait, plasticity, what does that mean exactly?
So neuroplasticity refers to the brain's ability to change and adapt throughout life. It means that our experiences, thoughts, and actions can literally shape the structure and function of our brains.
So if we constantly focus on negative thoughts or limiting beliefs, we're actually wiring our brains for negativity.
That's the idea. But the good news is that the reverse is also true. By focusing on positive thoughts, empowering beliefs, and visualizing our desired outcomes, we can rewire our brains for success, happiness, and well-being.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like we have the power to sculpt our own brains. Okay, now I'm really intrigued by this whole mirror rule and how it can actually help us achieve our goals.
It's a powerful tool, and I think the key is to approach it with intention and consistency. The more we engage in those vivid visualizations, the more we reinforce those neural pathways associated with our desired outcomes.
So it's about training our brains to believe in our own success. I love it. Okay, before we move on to the next habit, I want to pause for a moment and ask you what's resonating with you so far. Is there a particular habit that's really standing out to you?
That's a great question. Honestly, they're all interlinked and build upon each other. But I think the emphasis on self-trust, that trust capital, is really resonating with me. It's like the foundation upon which all the other habits are built.
I agree. Without that fundamental belief in ourselves, it's hard to imagine setting boundaries, pursuing our dreams, or bouncing back from setbacks with any real conviction.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that inner strength and knowing that we can handle whatever challenges come our way.
All right, well, with that in mind, let's move on to habit number 5, the energy audit. Now, this one is all about being mindful of what we consume, not just food, but also information media and even the people we surround ourselves with.
It's about recognizing that everything we take in has an impact on our energy, our emotions, and even our thoughts. And high-achieving women seem to understand this and are incredibly intentional about curating their environment to support their goals.
So it's not just about what we put in our bodies, it's about what we feed our minds as well. What are some of Dr. Bates' recommendations for conducting this energy audit?
Well, she shares a really powerful anecdote about her time working in palliative care, witnessing the fragility of life firsthand. This experience led her to be incredibly intentional about how she spends her time and energy, making sure her actions are aligned with her values and goals.
That's a powerful reminder that we don't have unlimited time and energy. We need to be selective about what we allow into our lives, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And that includes the people we choose to spend time with. We all know those energy vampires, those people who leave us feeling drained and depleted. Dr. Bate emphasizes the importance of surrounding ourselves with positive, supportive people who inspire us and lift us up.
Oh, I love that it's about creating an environment that nurtures our growth and helps us to thrive. Okay, I'm ready to hear about the next habit. What's up next?
Habit number 6 is all about networking, but with a twist. Dr. Bate calls it social currency, and it goes beyond the typical collect as many business cards as possible advice.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So she's talking about the power of what sociologists call weak ties. These are those acquaintances you might not interact with regularly, but who can open doors to unexpected opportunities and perspectives.
Wait, so she's saying that our casual acquaintances are more likely to lead to new opportunities than our close friends and family.
That's right, and there's research to back it up. A Harvard study found that a whopping 84% of new opportunities come from these weak ties, not from our inner circle.
That's fascinating. Why do you think that is?
Well, think about it. Our close friends and family often move in the same circles, have similar experiences, and access to the same information. Weak ties, on the other hand, provide a bridge to entirely new networks, different viewpoints, and fresh information.
So it's like expanding our horizons and stepping outside our comfort zones. I'm starting to see how this social currency could be a real game changer.
It is, and Dr. Bate points out that weak ties can also help us avoid echo chambers, where we're only exposed to information that confirms our existing beliefs.
That's so important in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information and opinions. It's easy to get stuck in our own little bubbles and miss out on valuable perspectives.
Exactly. Building those weak ties allows us to challenge our assumptions, broaden our understanding, and see the world through a wider lens.
Okay, well, I'm definitely going to be rethinking my networking strategy after this. I'm ready to hear about the final habit. What's Dr. Bates' seventh habit for success?
She calls this one the bounce back code. And it's all about reframing failure as a learning opportunity rather than a sign of defeat. She argues that high achievers don't let setbacks define them, they use them as fuel for growth.
I love that because let's be real, life throws curveballs. We all face setbacks, failures, and disappointments. It's how we respond to those challenges that truly defines us.
And Dr. Bate really hits the nail on the head here. She talks about shifting our perspective on failure, seeing it not as a sign of defeat, but as an opportunity for growth.
It's about developing that mental toughness, that resilience that allows us to bounce back stronger and wiser from every experience.
Exactly. She emphasizes that high achievers don't let setbacks define them. They use them as fuel for growth.
Okay, so how do we develop this bounce back code? How do we become more resilient in the face of adversity?
Well, Dr. Bates suggests a few strategies, one of which is practicing self-compassion. Instead of beating ourselves up when we make mistakes, we can treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer a friend going through a tough time.
It's about recognizing that failure is a part of life. It's not a reflection of our worth as human beings. I love that.
Another key element is to focus on solutions rather than dwelling on the problem. When we're faced with a setback, it's easy to get stuck in a cycle of negativity and self-doubt, but resilient individuals shift their focus to finding ways to overcome the challenge and move forward.
So it's about asking empowering questions like, what can I learn from this? What resources do I have available? What's the next step I can take? And then taking action, even if it's just a small step.
Exactly, because action is the antidote to despair. When we take action, even imperfect action, we regain a sense of control and start to build momentum.
That's such a great point. So the bounce back code is essentially about developing a growth mindset, believing that we can learn and grow from our experiences, and using those experiences to become stronger and more resilient.
I think you've captured it perfectly.
Well, before we wrap up part one of this deep dive, I have one more question for you. Out of all the habits we've discussed so far, is there one that you're most excited to try implementing in your own life?
I think for me it's the mirror rule. I've always been intrigued by the power of visualization. And I'm excited to experiment with those specific techniques like the perfect day exercise and the neuroscience-backed vision board to see how they can help me achieve my goals. What about you?
That's a great choice. For me, I think it's a tie between the refuse reset and the energy audit. I
Mm.
realize that I need to be more intentional about setting boundaries and protecting my time and energy. And I'm also curious to see how shifting my consumption habits, both in terms of media and information, might impact my overall well-being.
Those are excellent choices, and I think they complement each other beautifully.
All right, well, listeners, we've covered a lot of ground in part one of this deep dive into the habits of highly successful women. We've explored the importance of financial empowerment, self-trust, setting boundaries, harnessing the power of visualization, conducting an energy audit, building social currency, and cultivating resilience. We'll be back in part two to continue our exploration of these powerful habits. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you.
What are your thoughts on these habits? Which one resonates most strongly with you? Let us know in the comments, and we'll be back soon to continue the conversation. As we delve deeper into these habits, it strikes me that Dr. Bate isn't just offering like a checklist for success. She's painting a picture of a lifestyle, a way of being in the world that prioritizes both inner growth and outer achievement.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. It's like she's saying, hey, true success isn't just about what you accomplish, it's about who you become along the way. She's
Right.
encouraging women to build this strong foundation of self-awareness, self-trust, and resilience so they can create a life that feels authentic and fulfilling.
Exactly, and that's what I appreciate about her approach.
Yeah.
She's not peddling quick fixes or shortcuts. She's acknowledging that real growth takes time, effort, and a willingness to challenge ourselves.
hmm It's about building those habits, those small, consistent actions that over time lead to big, meaningful changes. And speaking of habits, I wanted to circle back to the idea of the refuse reset for a moment. I think for a lot of women, myself included, setting boundaries can be a real struggle. It's like we've been conditioned to be the caregivers, the peacemakers, the ones who always put others' needs first.
It's true, and I think Dr. Bate understands that dynamic well. She's not suggesting that women become cold or uncaring, but rather that they learn to prioritize their own well-being without feeling guilty or selfish about it.
Right, and she even provides some practical tips for actually setting those boundaries, like using simple phrases like I'd love to, but I can't right now, or that doesn't work for me. I find those so helpful because they're clear, concise, and you don't need to give this long explanation.
Yeah, I agree. They allow you to assert your needs without getting bogged down in justifications or apologies. It's about recognizing that you have a right to say no without feeling obligated to please everyone all the time.
Right. And I think it's important to remember that setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others. It's also about saying yes to yourself. It's about making choices that honor your values, protect your time and energy, and allow you to show up fully for the things that truly matter to you.
Absolutely. It's about creating a life that feels aligned with your authentic self, not a life that's dictated by the expectations or demands of others.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of setting boundaries and protecting our energy. Now let's shift gears a little bit and explore one of my favorite habits, the mirror rule, and the power of visualization. I'm so fascinated by the idea that we can literally rewire our brains by focusing on our desired outcomes.
It is remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
The human brain is so adaptable and malleable. Dr. Bate explains that when we engage in vivid visualization, our brains actually fire neurons in the same way they would if we were actually experiencing that reality. It's like creating a mental blueprint for success.
Wow. And she emphasizes that it's not just about passively daydreaming or wishing for things to happen. It's about actively engaging with the process using specific techniques like the perfect day exercise and the neuroscience-backed vision board to make those visualizations as real and tangible as possible.
Exactly. And the perfect day exercise is particularly powerful
Hmm.
because it encourages you to engage all of your senses, creating this rich, multi-sensory experience that feels almost as real as an actual memory. It's like giving your brain a taste of what it feels like to actually achieve your goals.
And then the vision board serves as this visual reminder of your aspirations, further embedding those desires in your subconscious mind. It's like creating a visual roadmap for your brain to follow.
I love that analogy. It's like giving your brain a clear destination and then providing it with the tools and resources it needs to navigate the journey.
And the more we engage with these visualizations, the more we reinforce those neural pathways associated with our desired outcomes, making it more likely that we'll actually achieve those goals. It's almost like training our brains to believe in our own success.
Precisely. And that shift in belief, that confidence in our own abilities can have a ripple effect throughout our lives, empowering us to take risks, pursue our passions, and overcome challenges that might previously seemed insurmountable.
So visualization isn't just about achieving specific goals, it's about cultivating a mindset of possibility, a belief that we are capable of creating the lives we want.
I couldn't agree more. It's about shifting from a place of limitation to a place of empowerment, where we recognize that we have the power to shape our own reality.
Okay, so we've talked about setting boundaries, protecting our energy, and harnessing the power of visualization. Now I want to shift gears again and explore the idea of social currency a bit further. I'm really intrigued by Dr. Bates' emphasis on the power of weak ties, those casual acquaintances who can often lead to unexpected opportunities.
It's a fascinating concept, isn't it? It challenges that traditional notion of networking, where we're often encouraged to focus on building relationships with people who are already in positions of power or influence.
Right, it's like we're taught to climb the social ladder by connecting with those who are already at the top. But Dr. Bate is suggesting that we might actually be missing out on valuable connections and insights by overlooking those who are outside our immediate circle.
Exactly, and the research backs this up. Remember that Harvard study we mentioned earlier, the one that found that 84% of new opportunities come from weak ties? It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most valuable connections are the ones we least expect.
So, how do we go about cultivating these weak ties? Does this mean we need to start attending all those awkward networking events?
Well, networking events can certainly be helpful, but they're not the only way to build connections. It can be as simple as striking up a conversation with someone new at a coffee shop, joining a club or group related to your interests, or even reaching out to someone you admire on social media.
I love that. It's about being open and curious and recognizing that every interaction has the potential to lead to something meaningful.
And remember, building relationships takes time. It's about nurturing those connections, showing genuine interest, and offering value to others. It's a two-way street.
So it's not about using people to get ahead. It's about building authentic connections and creating a network of support and collaboration.
Exactly, and I think Dr. Bay would argue that this kind of networking is not only beneficial for our careers, but it's also enriching for our lives as a whole. It allows us to expand our horizons, learn from others, and build a community of like-minded individuals.
Speaking of community and support, let's talk about the final habit, the bounce back code. Life is full of challenges, setbacks, and disappointments. And Dr. Bate argues that it's not about avoiding those challenges, it's about learning to bounce back from them with resilience and grace.
hmm She really emphasizes the importance of reframing failure, seeing it not as a sign of defeat, but as an opportunity for growth. She even shares her own personal experience with overcoming the fear of failure and how her perspective shifted over time.
Yeah, I find her story so inspiring, especially because she acknowledges that this shift in mindset doesn't happen overnight. It takes practice, self-compassion, and a willingness to challenge those negative self-talk patterns.
Right. It's about recognizing that failure is a part of life. It's not a reflection of our worth as human beings. And it's about giving ourselves permission to make mistakes, to learn from them, and to keep moving forward.
And she offers some practical strategies for building resilience, like practicing self-compassion, focusing on solutions rather than dwelling on problems, and taking action, even if it's just a small step.
And remember, action is the antidote to despair. When we take action, even imperfect action, we regain a sense of control and start to build momentum.
So the bounce back code is essentially about developing a growth mindset, believing that we can learn and grow from our experiences and using those experiences to become stronger and more resilient. It's about embracing challenges, learning from our mistakes, and never giving up on ourselves.
Beautifully put. It's about cultivating that inner strength that allows us to weather the storms of life and emerge even stronger on the other side.
All right, so we've explored all 7 habits, and I have to say I'm feeling incredibly inspired. Dr. Bate offers such a refreshing and empowering perspective on success.
I agree. She reminds us that true success isn't just about external achievements. It's about cultivating inner strength, self-awareness, and a mindset that supports growth in all areas of life.
And these habits aren't just for women at the top of their game. They're for anyone who wants to create a life of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a stay-at-home parent, a student, or anyone in between, these habits can help you to unlock your potential and live a life that feels truly aligned with your authentic self.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, listeners, we've covered a lot of ground in part 2 of this deep dive. We've delved deeper into the habits of the refuse reset, the mirror rule, social currency, and the bounce back code. We've explored the importance of setting boundaries, harnessing the power of visualization, building authentic connections, and cultivating resilience. But before we move on to part three, I have a question for you, our listeners, and for you too.
I'm all ears.
Think about all the habits we've discussed so far. Is there one that you're particularly struggling with or one that you're excited to implement in your own life? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. We'll be back in part three to wrap things up and offer some final takeaways from Dr. Bates' inspiring work. Welcome back to part three of our deep dive, into those 7 habits from Dr. Faye Bate. For those of you who are just joining us, we've been talking about the habits of highly successful women and how we can all kind of learn from them. So before we wrap up this whole deep dive, I wanted to touch on one more habit that really stood out to me. It's the energy audit.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
This idea of being mindful of what we consume, not just in terms of like food, but also information, media, and the company we keep.
Yeah, that one's so important.
It's crucial, but it's so easy to forget about it. It's so easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of daily life and totally forget to take stock of what we're feeding our minds and our souls. And I thought Dr. Bates' story about her time working in palliative care was such a good illustration of this point. It's like such a powerful reminder of just how precious our time and energy are.
Yeah. It is kind of a sobering reminder that life is finite. We need to be really intentional about how we spend our time and with whom we spend it. Each day is a gift, right? And we have the power to choose how we use that gift.
Absolutely. And choosing wisely means being mindful of our inputs, what
Yeah.
we read, what we watch, what we listen to, and who we surround ourselves with. These all have an impact on our thoughts, emotions, and ultimately our actions.
Yeah, totally. It's like we're constantly curating our own inner landscape, right?
Yeah.
Are we filling it with beauty, inspiration, positivity? Or are we letting negativity, drama, and distractions take root?
Oh, that's such a great point. And I think Dr. Bate would argue that high-achieving women really get this. They understand this principle, They're not just mindful of what they eat, they're also mindful of what they consume mentally and emotionally.
Right. They're making these conscious choices about the information they allow into their minds, the media they consume, the people they spend time with. They understand that their energy is precious and they protect it.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean we have to live in a bubble and avoid all negativity, but it's about being aware of the impact that our choices have on our well-being and just making sure that the majority of our inputs are nourishing and supportive.
Yeah. It's about creating an environment that fosters growth, creativity, inspiration, surrounding ourselves with people who, lift us up, challenge us to be our best selves, and support us on our journeys.
I love that. So it's about creating a life that feels good on the inside and reflects that goodness on the outside.
Yeah.
So listeners, as you're kind of thinking about these 7 habits from Dr. Bate, I encourage you to consider how you might incorporate this energy audit into your own life. What are you consuming? Who are you surrounding yourself with? And most importantly, are these choices serving you well?
Yeah. Those are great questions to ask yourself. And the answers might surprise you. Sometimes making even small changes to our environment can have this ripple effect on our well-being, and it can lead to more energy, more focus, and more joy.
Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation, and I think that's the perfect note to end on. We've explored these 7 really powerful habits that can help us create a life of success, fulfillment, and purpose. But remember, these habits aren't one size fits all. Take what resonates with you, experiment, adapt, and make them your own.
Yeah, and be patient with yourself. Building new habits takes time and effort. Celebrate your progress, learn from your setbacks, and just keep moving forward one step at a time.
That's great advice. So to all of our listeners out there, go out, embrace these habits, and start creating the life you deserve. And just remember, you are capable of incredible things.
You are absolutely believe in yourself, trust the journey, and never stop growing.
That's all for this deep dive into Dr. Faye Bates' 7 habits of top 1% women. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another insightful conversation.